This episode is brought to you by Tina's Vodka.
Hi, it's Chrysa Chin. I'm Chief Player Engagement Officer at the National Basketball Players Association. I have oversight of 6 departments: player health, mental health and wellness, off the court, player programs, player matters, and career development. And this is her table.
Now you see her.
You are magnificent!
Welcome to Her Table, the podcast that shines a spotlight on the badass women who are redefining the game. Join hosts Kate Foley and Megan Martinez as they unlock the secrets of success from the brightest female pioneers in the industry.
Welcome back to another inspiring episode of Her Table. I am so excited to bring my dear friend and longtime colleague in the NBA, Chrysa Chin, to the show. She is the EVP of the National Basketball Players Association. She has had an amazing journey in her career in sports and professional development over the last 20 years.
Prior to joining the NBPA, Chrysa served as the Vice President for Player Development for the NBA, where she was the first woman to hold a management position in the Player Development Department and the title of Vice President. She played active roles with the NBA's Rookie Transition Program, USA Basketball, and the WNBA.
It's such an honor to have Chrysa here today, all the way from New York. She is so inspiring, has changed so many lives, and has some of the most iconic moments that I have seen in sports in the last 20 years. Pull up a chair and welcome to Her Table. Chrysa, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. This has been a long time coming, friend. Long time coming.
It has been, and I'm excited to be here with you both.
Oh, yeah.
We are so proud.
This for like ever. She's like, Chrysa Chin. I can't wait to get her on. I'm like, I need to meet Chrysa Chin. So, yeah, we're really excited about having you on.
Great.
No. Okay, so I want to jump in. We want to kind of jump a couple of places because your story is so empowering,
And it's 32 years long, so there's that.
I mean, there's that. So I feel like we might be in another episode. The next one's going to be on set. Well, we'll have to sit there, be a little comfortable. It's fine. It's a good time. It's a vibe. It's a total vibe. We'll even have coffee for you that you don't have to pay for.
Oh, I love that.
Maybe a little drink too. Never know. You have to mix both in. Okay, so you're from New York.
Born and raised,
and you're still in New York, which is
still in New York. Yeah.
Is it because you can't get out, or you just love it so much you don't want to leave it?
No, I've been many places in the world, certainly all over the country, and New York is home for me. A lot of our business obviously is here, so it makes sense to be headquartered here. Don't love the weather, but I do love everything else about it. I do love the convenience of being here. I love the diversity. That's really important to me, being I'm a Black woman, but multicultural for sure. So, those pieces are important to me. And I like the pace. I like the pace. Like let's get it done. Let's go.
She moves. She's the one walking on the moving sidewalk, not standing on the moving sidewalk.
I'm definitely not standing. I'm like, let's go.
She's the one that's like, why are you not utilizing extra steps in your day? Here, we need to keep.
Okay, we look at the airport too, by the way, when people are it's like they have to learn how to deplane because they don't get off the plane quickly enough, and they have to learn how to go through security. It's like, get your tray and move it down to the other end. Get your stuff and beat it.
There should be a whole class on this. I feel like there should be a lane for, like, if you travel a lot, experienced travelers, and those just starting the process.
Yeah,
they should all have like a learning curve. The rest
they
of
used
us
to have that. Actually, they had that at one point. Frequent travelers, and then others. Our former executive director, maybe a couple ago, Michelle Roberts, used to tease me about that in the airport because she said, the people are slow on the conveyor. Chris is gonna be upset. I'm like, get the tray, move it down to the other end.
I feel like it's because you've just, like, in this world, especially in sports, your time is so critical, and where you spend it, who you give it to, the energy it takes from you is just, it's finite, right? And so I find, especially for me, like, I have a system. I know what time to get there. I know where to park. I know where I'm going to get a coffee. I know where I'm going to the bathroom. I know all the stops along the way.
Yep.
And it's so funny because I feel like I get wrapped up in my own self sometimes when I travel with some of my staff that don't do this a lot. I'm like, how do you not know that?
Right.
You don't know that? And they're like, no. And I'm like, what?
The funnier thing is when you have to connect, I think you know what airports you want to connect through.
Yes, yes.
I love going to Houston or connecting through Houston because I know if I can get to E4, I'm going to Papados, and I build that in, or if I'm on the West and somehow I'm coming, red eye and I got to go through Seattle, like I have my shops that I go to while I'm in the airport, or Minnesota, or just the different airports. And so yeah, I mean, you have to develop, if you have to travel, which this work requires that, you have to figure out how do you make things work. I have a big joke with my staff about some of my clothes, because sometimes I say, where'd you get that? I'm like, I bought it in the airport, because that's where I shop. I shop in the airport. So
people shop on Amazon. Chrysa's in the airport. She's like, I already know where I'm stopping. I know where to go. Vegas is fun for that. I like the Vegas airport shops. They got a couple little spicy things in there. So
yeah, Vegas has, JFK has, what Atlanta has. But I mean, again, it's about time, right? We're busy. Our days are really, really long, and where some people may have an opportunity to go shopping on the weekend. Many of us are, we might be at pre-draft or combine or playoffs or whatever it is. So you have to figure it out, I don't even think it's a gender thing. I just think it's a work thing. Right. You have to figure it out. So, yeah.
So you started as a case manager for the city of New York.
Several careers ago. But
that was your first stop in this journey on the
It was.
Right? Like
it was out of college. Yeah.
And you got a degree in a Bachelor of Arts or International Relations?
Yep, I did. Okay. I did. Okay. And I minored in religious studies.
And now you're one of the most powerful women in the NBA. Like, walk me through how you went from the first stop in the Yellow Brick Road to this stop today.
Okay, well,
she's like 2 years later. This is where you
right. I wish, but I'll make it quick. But I do think the experiences are important, right? I graduated from college, and I was a case manager for the city of New York, and I got to work with different populations of people, the criminally insane. Probably one of my most interesting cases that I had as a case manager, the elderly population, and then juvenile delinquents. And juvenile delinquents, as they are labeled, are my favorite. They were my favorite population. The criminally insane piece was interesting in many ways, but it was also very rewarding because, when you do that type of work, you get to see the impact, and often you see it immediately. In that case, I had a gentleman who he yelled and screamed at me every day, cursed me out every day, called me things that I'd not even heard before. And I was like, hey. But at the same time, at the end, he thanked me for the efforts in my work. And he, even though he, psychologically was where he was, he, his case was several months behind when I inherited it. And so he had a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and all of that. But anyway, all of that to say that at the end, he apologized for all of the terrible things that he called me and the way that he acted toward me and treated me, but was appreciative of the work. So I only use that example to say that, in a lot of the journeys or a lot of the stops, you have an opportunity to make impact and affect people's lives in a way that means something to them. Forget what it means to you. It means something to them, and that's what's important. And so I did that, for a bit, and then thought I wanted to go to law school. So, was paralegal, and then became a case manager in the securities litigation systems. Developed, I still don't know to this day how I developed an expertise in securities litigation. I remember when I first, when somebody said I was an expert in securities litigation, I'm like, what the heck is that? Like, what does that even mean? But I developed that expertise and had opportunity to work on really high profile cases that, that afforded me opportunity to travel around the country and review documents and, identify, pieces of evidence that were critical to the settlement of some very high profile cases. And so, I did that and got a lot of W's there, and then decided I was bored, which is kind of my personality. If I get bored, then I can no longer be 150% in. And we and my family, the whole Butler clan, as I like to say, we were raised with that work ethic. Like if you're doing something, whatever it is, it has to be 150%, right? If you're cleaning the bathroom, 150%. Like my grandmother would say, I should be able to eat off the floor, right? So, I mean, with that sort of detail. And so I always committed to my work in that very same way. And when my major, my last really, really big case settled, I decided, I don't want to do this anymore. And I don't want to go to law school like I thought I did originally. So now what am I going to do? And I had a passion for sport. And that was, the very, very top of the 90s. And it was not, women were not, popular in sports, women executives, women managers, women staff. I mean, you just didn't find it at a high level the way that you do today. And we're still not where we need to be, but we are getting there. There have been some inroads made for sure. So, I was told, it was discounted by everyone. Oh, you're crazy. You're not going to be successful. They'll never accept you. And, all of those things. And I had an opportunity to start actually where I am today, and that's at the Players Association. And so I worked for Charlie Grantham, as a special assistant to him and a manager, and they allowed me, he and Isaiah Thomas was the president at that time. They allowed me to do the work that I do. I was able to sell my transferable skills that I had developed and sell them in sport and show how they applied and how they could align. And, and it worked out. And I give a lot of credit to them to this day, because they empowered me at a time when women were not being empowered in this industry. And so, people, for many different reasons, would try to circumvent me, or, and Charlie and Isaiah would always say, you run that by Chrysa? Did Chrysa approve that? And so they didn't allow people to circumvent me. And
that's so important. That is
so important. It's so important.
It's a skill and it's actually a skill. It is a skill to be able to have a tough conversation and realize what someone's trying to do without coming across as nasty or ugly, or like you're being protected. It's like, hey, like, this is her job. Let her do her job.
Right.
Having your back to tell people, let her do her job. She's good at it.
Yep.
Go talk to her. Don't come around. That's so important and so powerful, because so many women don't have that.
Right. And it's, we call it now today, the sort of the buzzword, I guess, for it is allyship, right? We all want allyship. And so, but again, this was at a time when there were no buzzwords. There were, that just kind of wasn't what was happening, but they had the respect and the confidence in my ability, even though I was coming from a different industry. And so, so I did that, and it was great. And, they allowed me great visibility, and I was able to do many, many things. And then, as happens in many organizations, leadership changes. And so when it changed, I left, and consulted for Nike for 3 years, and did that and loved it. It was a lot of fun. It was out of New York, and, it was some troubleshooting, some events management, player facing, in many regards, elite youth facing, and but also, another really good opportunity to do some great work and stay connected. And then David Stern, and Adam Silver. David was the commissioner at that time, and Adam, I think, might have been the president of NBPA at that time. They asked me to come, and help launch the W, which I did. And, they said I'd have to sever my ties with Nike. I did that, and came to the NBA, and they said after the inaugural season, they would transfer me to men's basketball. And I was like, okay. So, and I, again, but it was, I had a great relationship with Adam when I was at the NBPA, the first time. We were counterparts. He was special assistant to Adam. I was special assistant to Charlie. And so, it worked out well. Adam's great. We had a great relationship, and then I came over and learned about some things that I didn't know. There was a position that I think, I don't think it exists today, but was called broadcast liaison. And so something that happens now that didn't happen then was, NBC, Lifetime, and ESPN had to cross promote the games. And so that was my job, was to liaise with those 3 networks and make sure folks had the information that they needed to do that. And it was very unusual, back then in 97. I mean, it just wasn't common. But again, did that, and then, went over to men's basketball and had different roles. And then ultimately was transitioned. I covered my very good friend, I call her my twin, Leah Wilcox-Kate, who I think you know. Megan, I don't know if you know Leah, but Leah was going out on maternity leave, and they asked me if I would run Leah's department while she was gone. I did that, and then she came back, and Leah and I had, we were like planning to take over the world. But it was funny, and Russ Granick and others at that time was brilliant. They said, we couldn't have 2 people with strong player relationships in the same group. We needed to spread it throughout the organization, which was smart. So they transitioned me to a group that was then called Player Programs, now called Player Development. It was run by Satch Sanders. Historically, it had been all former players, right, and rightfully so. And so they'd not had a woman in their group, and a woman in a managerial position. And so, I laugh with Satch now and did back then. It was just an unusual situation.
The learning curve.
For
I
us.
call that the learning curve, right?
For them, not for me.
No, totally.
Right? Yeah. So
for them, it's like, I'm going to help you through this one.
Here. Yeah. So yeah, it was really funny, and we have, we laugh about it today, but it was a very different environment, right? So I mean,
was it uncomfortable? Was it just intense, intimidating?
Like, I was not intimidated. I mean, Megan, you don't know me. Kate does, but yeah, I'm like, I'm 5 feet tall, but I've had to fight, my entire life. So this was, so it's just like, it's like, it's cool. And I want to get along with everyone, and I want everybody to, I want us to all like be aligned and go forward. But, but it's different, and people have to get to know you. And if they, the perception can be whatever it is. But my work ethic, again, has just always been strong. And so, there was, I always tell this story because I think it's, I don't know if everybody thinks it's funny. I think it's hilarious. So I came in one day and everyone's office was empty. And I looked at my calendar and I'm like, is there a meeting, or like, where is everybody? And I'm like looking around, and like no one's around. And so I knock on Satch's door, and no one answers the door, but the door is closed. And so at that time you had to be dressed to go to work. And so, I have all sorts of things swirling around in my head, and so I take off my shoe and I start beating on the door. My personality is like, this is like, I know
you hear me. Let me be a little louder.
Yeah, let me be a little louder, because I was like, and so he opened the door and he said yes, and they were all sitting in there. We're all sitting in there, and I said, is there a meeting? And he looked back and he said, well, yeah. I said, are you talking about player programs business? And he said, yeah. I said, well, pull up a chair because I'm joining the meeting. And so he said,
it again, pull it up, my friends, let's go.
And he said, well, all right. And they pulled up, he pulled up a chair, and it was fine. And there were no bad feelings. But I said to him after that, I said, you know what? From now on, we are going to have 6 minutes of bonding time every day, because you are going to learn to like me. me. And I knew him before. So, it's not like I didn't know him. I knew him when I was at the PA. Mm-hmm. But, then we got along great and everything was fine. And he, and rightfully so, was protective of the players and thought that maybe the introduction, of a woman into this space to discuss the things that we had to discuss, may be off-putting to our players. And so, he said, look, if the guys are not going to talk to you, then I'm not going to be able to have you in front. And I said, I'm not arrogant or cocky. I said, but there's a part of me that thinks that they may talk to me more because I'm a woman, and most, men are raised by their mothers, grandmothers, and aunts. And so it's a different approach, and it's not competitive. It's just a different approach, right? So, there are things that I can't discuss with players. And I always say, I didn't play, I feel like I'm a player because I've lived through all of it with them on and off the court and, all of that. But it's not the same, but it is a complementary team that can be formed if you are strategic. And so, I was able to have great impact with our guys and they knew me from my, time at the Players Association. They knew me from Nike. I developed relationships. I, developed trust because I always say, it goes in the vault and doesn't come out. And, what I know will die with me. I'm not going to ever write a book or any of this crap that people, you have to write a book. I'm like, about what? I can write a book about approach and how to engage and how to develop relationships, but never about the experiences that my players have had, good, bad, or indifferent, unless they ask me to share it. So,
so Chrysa, you just went through this whole thing,
and
I'm just sitting here. I'm sitting here in awe because what you started as and your journey and path, right, was not by design. It does not sound like. It does not sound like you had a mood board with like your dream job on it, and then you had your roadmap. And it's so funny because, even for myself and Megan, as she's in her career, like sometimes you have this dream job that you want and you miss the actual purpose in your life because you're so focused on what you think you should be doing instead of letting the universe bring you to places you can contribute, because everybody's skill set's different. Everyone's talented in different ways. And I think as I listen to your story, it's like you had such a unique talent and skill set that could be applied at any stage, age, and path in your career, that it was, whether that was a leadership or a support role, right? It was needed. Yep. What classes do you wish you would have taken in school or helped prepare? Or is there a class that would have prepared you more?
Nothing.
I'm saying hostage negotiation, Chrysa, because that's what I wish I had taken some FBI class of like.
No, but some things are, it's interesting because some things I think, and I've learned this, some things can't be taught. You can't, there are some things you can't teach, right? You can't, people always say, how do you talk to players? I'm like, like people, I don't know. I just, I'm respectful. I'm big on that. And, I'm older than most of the universe, but I make sure that, that players understand that I respect them and that I hear them and that I'm acting on what they say. But there's not anything, I always think, I wish I had gone to law school. I wish I had done this, and not really. Not really. Not really. I think that a lot of what I learned in my roles along the way.
Experience. Right, which is oftentimes, it's like experience, and oftentimes that's more valuable than a classroom because the book is not applied a lot in real life, unfortunately.
No, it's not. But you also, part of that is ability to be able to develop the skill set or learn. You have to have leaders that empower you, right, and that put you in positions they're not threatened. Like I worked for some really great people, in my along the way. If I go back when I was at when I worked for the city, Phil Rothenberg, greatest supervisor ever, heard me, understood me, let me do my thing. Got to the law firm. I had Joe Murillo, who was a kick behind attorney, and his name was DJ O'Brien, was the partner. I mean, they were, and Bernie McCarthy, they let me go, they let me do my thing. And then, Charlie and Isaiah, I've talked about them, Satch, and then I had Steve Mills and Mike Bantam and all of these great leaders that allowed me to work and empowered me. And then, you had the beauty of David Stern and Russ Granick and Adam and, just Mark Tatum, like all of these wonderful people that you could work with and for, that really wanted to partner. And, of course, there were women that were involved. I mean, folks know, obviously Kathy Barron's. If I think about here at the PA, Michelle Roberts, and, that was part of me coming back, along with at the urging of the executive committee. So, you have to have leaders that let you develop along the way and that trust you to take a risk and understand that you may be on to something. I always laugh about Mike Bantam, who led our department for a while, former player. And I learned a lot about leadership from him because he allowed you to, he didn't always agree with what you said. So, you didn't get that, but what he would say.
Let you talk, and then he was like, "But and."
Yeah, but he did something really great. On occasions, like, yeah, he said, I don't know, I don't trust it, but I'm gonna let you do it. Wow. And if it fails, it'll be a different conversation, right? And you gotta love that because I had to, because then you have to think about what kind of risk am I taking? How confident am I in this thought or this idea, right? That this is gonna work. But he did, and when I got the wins, he came back and said, he would always say, what, kid, I didn't think that was gonna work, but good, you did great. And he, and he continued to empower me and supported me and would make sure, people have to make sure that you continue to be elevated.
Yeah. I feel like it's so important because like Kate and I talk about it all the time where we're celebrating women, but you also have to like acknowledge the men that also lift you and like, create.
Well, that's why I made it a point of doing that. Yeah.
And I love that. And like when you're talking about Isaiah Thomas and everything, like really making sure that you're included and that you're this vital part of this, NBPA and the organization. From like an audience point of view, can you kind of go over, we were briefly talking about how you're in Atlanta, you're all over the place, you're coming to LA. Can you kind of touch on basically your job as the VP of Chief Player Engagement for the NBPA? I know it's a huge role and this is a loaded question.
Right. So in my role, I oversee 6 departments as Chief Player Engagement Officer. Those departments are mental health and wellness, player health, player programs, art, off the court, which is a transition program, Player Matters. And then we have a career development department, but we're actually in the process where we're going through a reorg and restructure. So a lot of that is moving around and changing. But in that oversight, those are all player facing groups. And I also have oversight of our drug program and crisis management. So often you're deploying or you are deployed for certain reasons, not all of them public, not all of them catastrophic, but just in need of strategy. And so, that's what it takes. You have to be up and going. We have our agent seminar next week in LA. And so, I will be there for that to talk about something I was going to talk about a little bit later, but what we have an initiative or a program that I started when I came called First Call, meaning that the Players Association is your first call, and this is sort of the team, and this is how it helps, and it's not in competition with agents or agencies. It's actually a support or a collaboration with, so that the player is getting the best service. And so, I often will talk about that in different groups and talk about our drug program and coming forward and, something that those things that can create issues for our players, in our industry, steroids and performance enhancing drugs, because of, you think you're taking a vitamin, it's not really a vitamin, and it's contaminated. And so we just have all these issues. And so I like to make sure, to the extent that I can, at least top level, making sure that the folks that are supporting our players have an understanding of it, and they know who to call when something comes up. If a player is being extorted, we need to know about that. If there are, are other issues that have to be addressed. So,
I always think it's so interesting because, Megan, I call Chrysa. She's my first call. If I don't know where to go, I call Chrysa. And I'm like, it might not be you. I always tell her, this might not be you, but I know you'll send me down whatever lane I need to go. Yep. And I think it's so important that we talk about it, because a lot of times, especially in this day and age, everything's public, fast, quick. You can't get it back. Yes. And so trying to encourage agents, representatives, agencies, right, to have a better working relationship, for me, is important with the NBPA, because oftentimes everyone does like this. They just want to hold everything close. Don't talk to anybody but me, and I'll fix it. And I have done that in my career. It has not worked out well for me. It has been very much a path of could have handled that a different way and had a better outcome. But knowing that you have people that you can call and say, hey, don't judge me. Don't judge my client. Don't judge the situation. What should I do? What would you advise? Is so imperative, because so much of what these guys do, especially in any athlete, right, it's judged by somebody somewhere. And so to be able to have people in your corner that are not going to judge you, they're just going to tell us the information, and we're going to advise you on the best way to handle that, is really what, Chrysa, you do for me. Because I'm like, Chrysa, this might sound crazy, but here's what I got today.
Nothing is crazy.
That's my thing. Nothing shocks me anymore. I'm like, interesting. I don't even say wow anymore. I'm just like, interesting. But really trying to lean into that, because there was, for a long time, in my experience, a big divide between the league office, the Players Association, and then the agents. And all three of those groups play imperative roles in these athletes. I mean, I'm talking, without them, the wheel doesn't turn. Right. Nobody wanted to work together. Right. Because it was very territorial. It was very the association wanted this, the PA wanted this, and then your agency wants this. And really understanding and getting to know those people. And you talked earlier about relationships, right? Of even if it's just meeting people and finding where they live, what they like, what their day is like, is so important, because you have people pulling at you all day long. These guys have people pulling at them all day long. And so to have that relationship that's softer, easier toned. You talked about this earlier. Sometimes it's easier for a woman to have a really hard conversation and it's received better than a man. It's just, what's the tone, temperament, and read the room. Right. What for you has been an experience that you might have had where you've had to have a really, I'm sure you've had it today, probably a lot, but tough conversation to get to the other side, right? Like, it's going to be really hard to talk about, but we're going to come out the other side, whether that's with a player or a staff member.
So there, it's a really interesting question. So I think there are a lot of those conversations that you end up having, especially for me. I'll use the drug program as an example, right? Because sometimes someone may test positive and they may not have any idea about the who, what, why, or where. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they, but a lot of times they don't. And there are consequences, to testing positive. If it's a steroid or performance enhancing drug, it's a 25-game suspension. If it is what we called a banned substance, it is a dismissal and disqualification with only an opportunity to reapply, right? So those are really hard conversations. And what I always say to guys is, okay, look, you've tested positive. This is not, we have some work ahead of us.
No debate.
This is yeah. Well, I mean, the only thing is that normally when I'm having that conversation, it's because we've had two samples tested. When the collection occurs, there's an A sample and a B sample. So A comes back positive, I automatically have the B sample tested. Yeah. But it's rare that will come back negative. Sometimes it does, but rare. But what comes out of that is that you have to break the news, right? And you say, look, you've tested positive. These are the consequences. Here are some things that we need to do. I need you to backtrack and give me all of the information surrounding this date. I need you to look at these things. I need you to, so we go through the whole process. And I always say, look, worst case scenario is that there will be this penalty. But either way, we're going to come out on the other end. You're going to be fine, right? Yeah. So if you are penalized because there is no, there's not a mistake or whatever, we have to go from this point on. Yeah. That's all we can do. And so here is the strategy to recover. And guys really like the concept of from this point on, because there's never any judgment in my conversations. I don't care about, I just don't. I always say to guys, I want you to be safe. I don't care about any of the rest of it. I just want you to be safe. I don't care who, how, why. I just want you to be safe. Right. And I also say I'm in your corner all the way to try to help you get to the other end. Whatever we got to do, we can cry it out, fight it out, whatever. But I have rules, right? My rule is you can't lie to me, because you put yourself at a disadvantage and you put me at a disadvantage as I'm trying to negotiate on your behalf. So we have that. I said, and I tell the guys, there are two things that you can't come to me for because I can't help you. If you're accused of rape or accused of child molestation, I will be helpful. If you actually did it, not your person.
Right.
You have to see somebody else. I can't help you. And everybody understands that, and they respect that. Anything else we can try to figure out. We can work through. Those are things for me that personally that just are a no, right? So, so those are the conversations. I mean, you have to help players understand we might not get the win on this, but even still, you're going to be okay. This is how we're going to fix it. This is how we'll repair your image. This is how we'll work with your agent. This is how we'll do this. We will, we will engage our PR teams. We will, we will get through it. So those are the things, and it's great, right? Like I think about it, again, it's just sort of the greatness of our guys. Chris Paul was our former president of the union, and now we have CJ McCollum, and they're so easy to talk to, and Chris thinks nothing of referring guys and say, okay, you got to call Chrysa, and Chris is actually the reason that I'm back at the PA, because he was insistent that I that I come, but he also, I bring it up to say that he's he understands the resources. He refers guys to our players, our executive committee. Andre Iguodala is now at the helm. They will direct back to these resources so that we can help our players. And there's a confidence in the ability to do the work and get guys to the other side.
Though, Chrysa, like, how do you train your staff to? Like, I always look at this, like, I'm not going to do this forever. There's going to be a day I don't wake up, right? So how are you training your staff? And I think it speaks a lot to culture. I think it speaks a lot to teamwork, collaboration. And I also think it speaks to experience. But, like, how do you train your staff to – I always try and train them better than me, right? Like, I want you to be better than me. Learn from my losses, right? Let's share them. Learn from them because I want you to be better than me. That's not necessarily the norm. Like, that is not the norm in a lot of industries. How do you cultivate that?
It's hard. It depends. I mean, right, there are, I have oversight of 6 departments. So, different, player health does what it does, mental health and wellness. But for crisis management specifically, you have to really want to do the work, right? And so, I mean, because it's not for everybody. Like, it's not just a job. Like, you have to be all in or all out, because you can't straddle. on these issues. And so you have to be passionate about it. And once you identify someone who is passionate about it, really wants to do it, wants to learn, then you're in, you can start to train. So I have a young woman on my staff, Ricky Dean, leads a group that's now called Player Matters, right? And she's been with me for a long time. She took a little break for a second, but anyway, she's back and she's great. And so, initially she wasn't involved in the drug program at all, but I started to bring her in slowly. So now she's working. I have oversight over it, but she's working on the G League's drug program. So you have to, you get people in and then they start to experience different situations and you help them get through them. And then they begin to develop their own style, their own way of approaching and managing it. But you have to want to do that work, that part of the work, right? You have to want to deal with those things. It's not, because it's not the sexy job. It's not sexy. There's nothing cute about it.
It's mentally exhausting too, because it's funny. You talked about your first stop was with, the mentally insane, right?
Criminally insane, yeah.
Criminally insane. Sorry. Criminally insane. Don't come for me. I said it wrong. Nobody. You're
That's
all
okay.
listening. I didn't say it wrong. Sorry.
It's okay.
No, you know how it is. People wait for you to say something not right. Then they just, in the comments, they're like,
Yes.
You are oftentimes the crux, right, of the really pivotal moment of this is a really shitty time in somebody's life. Yep. And you have to be the sounding board, the adult, but also the reality check. Right. None of those things come with the thank you on the front end. They always come with the thank you on the back end, right? Like then it's just everybody's out for me. There's probably a lot of yelling, a lot of crying, whole lot of everything. And then it's not that like you leave for the day and you're like, wow, I just accomplished a lot. You're like, wow, I got through that day. Right. How do you take care of your own mental health in that setting? Because that's, for you to be able to give that to someone else, you also have to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the approach. I think it's the way that I look at it, because I'm looking, how can we get the win for this player? How can we get the win? And so that's where my energy is directed into that. It's not like, oh my gosh, this is so taxing. And like, I don't, that's just not even my personality. It's like, okay, we got a problem. Here's what we got to do. So I need you to do this, you to do that. There's a lot of collaboration that goes on with, sometimes with different departments, sometimes not, depending upon what it is. But I look at it that way. It's like, how can we get through this? Not like, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a challenge. I just never approach anything like that. It's like, okay, here's the deal. We got this problem. We got to solve it. I need persons A, B, and C or not. This is what I need you to do, and how are we going to team up to do this and figure it out? As it relates to myself, I think you have to have a balance. I have a son, my son, Joel, who's actually in sort of, we're in the same business. So it's kind of fun. He works for the Westchester Knicks, player development coach. And so, I have that balance because my son is my pride and joy. He's my heart and soul. So there's that. So I always have that to look forward to. I think also, people believe in different things. I've been a Buddhist for more than 40 years. And so, I think the way that I manage stress and issues, I think is different from how many people manage it. I don't, I look at problems holistically, and I try to figure out how we got there. Mm-hmm. And then, okay, now I know how we got there. How do we get from there to where we need to go to get the win, to get you back on the court, to be healthy, and to approach this in a way that makes sense? How do we recover? Is my focus.
That was such an amazing episode with Chrysa Chin. So many stories, so many paths to her career. Make sure you guys stay tuned. There's going to be a part 2 coming up soon.